You're listening to Best Forevers, a podcast for kindred spirits, a podcast that encourages you to love more on your friends and to further consider the issues that plague friendships. I'm Alysa Lucas, and I'm doing some math with the help of Jessica Price Jones, author of Happiness at Work. And according to her, okay, folks, check this out. We will spend approximately 90,000 hours in the workplace. Folks, that is nearly 1/3 of our lives. Think of all the seconds, minutes, hours, days, months, years in the workplace. And I'm sitting here wondering how many hours I've already clocked. But real talk, if we're going to spend that much time in the office or doing work, it seems critical that we enjoy our job or career, depending on how you describe it. And having friendships in the workplace or the lack thereof can truly have an impact on our work experience, including satisfaction, loyalty, and productivity. Now, I love to celebrate workplace friendships, so please share your stories either by emailing me at bestforeverspod@gmail.com or by checking out the surveys tab on my webpage, bestforeverspod.com. Now, on my webpage, there's a survey dedicated to these wonderful friendships, and it's not so much a survey as I give you a space to write. So please tell me everything. And then, dear listener, stay tuned for an episode focusing on the origins of your workplace friendships and all the hilarious, touching, and amazing stories of friendships from behind the register all the way to shared cubicles. I can't wait to hear it. Today, however, I like to focus on friendships, workplace cliques, and how loneliness can impact one's ability to be successful in the workplace. And I know you're probably thinking, cliques are so high school, right? It's very Mean Girls, quote, we wear pink on Wednesday, and quote, you can't sit with us kind of vibes. Or maybe a very Breakfast Club vibe where there's no way the jock, the princess, the geek, the basket case, and the criminal could ever be friends, right? But unfortunately, this phenomenon does not end with high school graduation. In fact, workplace cliques may be a sign of toxic environment, according to a 2015 Bustle post by Gabrielle Moss. Of course, circle of friends can be intimidating, but interacting with them one-on-one may help. However, if the group is having closed-door meetings, spreading rumors, and or showing little interest with working anyone else outside their group on projects or committees, then the group may have a negative impact on the office and all the workers. So cliques are found in K through 12 schooling, college, the workplace, and so many other places. But let's start by determining the difference between friends and cliques. We are likely to describe friendships as naturally forming around points of commonalities. So, for example, it's not a surprise that in high school I was friends with my fellow cheerleaders. And certainly Hollywood might tell us that I'm a quote-unquote bring it on sort of girl. I'm in a clique, a cheerleading cult, depending on your word choice. But here's the thing. I was also on the newspaper staff. It's called the Zodiac. I was a member of the Key Club, a member of the forensics team for a short amount of time, and I attended another school for a class in TV and radio, as well as I was friends with kids from previous schools I went to, dance classes, the neighborhood, church, and so on. So you could say that I may have several different types of friends across several different types of groups. This is friendship, okay? That we have these different kinds of friends and we are in these different kinds of groups based on commonalities. But even more, friendships are likely to showcase the markers of friendship, like enjoyment, social support, acceptance of each other, and so much more. Steve Newen wrote an article about workplace friendships for Workplace Psychology in January 2018. And the overall point of the article was that the workplace is ripe for positive connections because of close proximity of workers. And having such friendships can help fulfill one's need to belong. We all have that basic need to belong as human beings. And so the workplace is just one outlet in which we can have that fulfilled. And let's be honest, there is an abundance of social and instrumental rewards to be had from workplace friends, right? You feel good in the workplace when you have someone to joke with or take breaks with. You know, you work your long shifts with. I remember working at the movie theater and just how close we all became when we'd have sold out movies and just people in line and you're just trying to get through the rush. And that experience can bring people closer together, as well as all the times that we shoot the shit in the back room when it was slow as heck, right? That there's just so many times in which we can connect with each other, and maybe because of those connections, someone might be more likely to help you when your line gets a little bit longer than theirs, or maybe you're more likely to be asked to go out to dinner together after work. You know, there's lots of rewards that can come from it. And one thing I really enjoyed about the idea of this article was that we have peers in the workplace, right? That these are our coworkers, but we're friends with them if we'd be friends with them outside the workplace without the work connection at all. And so I think that's a great way to think about workplace friendships. We can be friendly in the workplace. We're not going to be friends with everyone, but then there might be a select few that we would be friends whether we worked with them or not. And I think that's an important distinction. Sherry Gordon outlined similar ideas in her November 18th, 2018 article about teen friends on the Very Well Family webpage. As well, she then distinguishes friendships from cliques. She indicates, quote, kids in these groups make it clear to outsiders that not just anyone can join and be a part of the group, end quote. Cliques are described as mean, looking to maintain their popularity and status, hurt and bully others, and ostracize, exclude, and leave out others. And something that makes cliques very much different than friendships are that they only spend time with each other. So in the movie Mean Girls, Katie, played by Lindsay Lohan, cannot join Regina George and her clique, the Plastics, until she was actually invited by them to sit with them. And in the 1988 movie Heathers, the three Heathers and Veronica are a clique. They each have a color they always wear in their outfits, red, yellow, blue, and green, which corresponds with which ball they use in the croquet games that they play. You know, I know high school students are really into croquet. They sit together at lunch, they gossip and make fun of others. They terrorize specific people by manipulating and humiliating them. And they aren't particularly kind and supportive of each other. One of the most famous quotes from the movie comes from the ringleader of the clique, and her name is Heather Chandler, and she says this to Veronica, and this is going to have a big F-bomb in it. Quote, they all want me as a friend or a fuck. I'm worshipped at Westerberg, and I'm only a junior, end quote. And it suggests that with popularity, you're very likely to be included, even though others are attracted to being friends or a partner to Heather or Regina George from Mean Girls, because that is likely to increase their popularity and they'll feel like they belong. And so I think that these movies and the article by Sherry Gordon gives us some ideas about how cliques operate in sort of this teen world, if you will, and that this idea that people are attracted to perhaps being a part of the group because they also want to be popular. They want to be liked by people. And Heather kind of says that like everyone wants to be with her in some way, whether it be a partner or a friend. And so I think we are attracted to cliques in some way because then maybe we can feel included. And then I know many of you are like, I'm not attracted to cliques at all. It's too much drama. And it is very high school. But again, it's not just high school. And I'm sure you're thinking, Alysa, yes, obviously those cliques that you described in Mean Girls and Heathers are very toxic. But honestly, cliques may not always be bad or intend to have some negative impact on the people around them. According to Cindy Benson's 2005 Odyssey Online post, The Real Problem with Cliques, she says there's actually not a problem with cliques, and that's the real problem. She suggests that cliques are inevitable, and I would tend to agree with Sydney. For example, like described previously, friendships are naturally forming, and not all cliques focus on the social and emotional destruction of others. So let's be clear. Any cliques that participate in the eroding of others' self-esteem, or that they purposely leave people out, or they purposely spread rumors about another, are problematic. Not everyone will be friends with each other. We can't assume that because we're all different. We all have different experiences, interests, personalities, and so much more. And the expectation that everyone be friends is just simply unrealistic. But there is still room for kindness and for appropriate communication given the context of the workplace. Those friendships with close bonds that might be perceived as a clique may just want to consider whether or not they create a perception of being unapproachable, or if they're very much sort of screaming, we're in group and you're out group. And so if that's the case, you are sort of screaming that in group over out group, maybe there's something you can do in the classroom or in workplace situations to be sure that you can include other people into your group. So as we talk about workplace cliques, I'm more thinking about cliques that contribute to a toxic environment, difficulty in getting promoted, and the effects on satisfaction in the workplace. So we know what high school movies look like in terms of cliques, but what do cliques in the workplace look like? Okay, so the next article that I read was also written by Sherry Gordon, and I was like, that's not a coincidence. And so I looked her up, and she's a bullying prevention expert, and I like that. She had an article for teens, and now we're looking at an article that focuses on the workplace. And so what I think that says is that she is writing a lot of stuff about this topic across different age groups and different contexts, which indicates to me, from her point of view as a bullying prevention expert, that cliques are a problem for all of us at any age and at any level, and that cliques obviously contribute to bullying, and let's, shut that shit down. Am I right? So her article is called 7 Ways Workplace Cliques Harm the Work Environment, and this was published in October 2018 on the Very Well Mind webpage. Okay, so here are the 7 ways. First, cliques usually don't socialize outside their group. And she mentioned that in her article about teens. And she describes this as excessive togetherness. And I think it is this idea that when you're in school and you think about high school cliques, you're with each other from 7 to 3:30 every single day, and then extracurricular activities, and then perhaps on the weekend. That's a lot of time spent with people. But again, don't forget about those 90,000 hours we spend in the workplace. That is a lot of time to be spent with each other, working on projects, sitting in the same office, having our desks next to each other, being behind the register, working a lot of shifts together. There's a lot of excessive togetherness that can happen. And then what can occur is that no one else is included because that group of people are always together. Maybe they're always on the same shift. Maybe they're always on the same committee. And so those are things to consider. The second one is they thrive when no one addresses their behavior. So in the workplace, we want to have unity among all employees, but you have to be careful here. This is a delicate balance when you do have a workplace clique that if no one says anything, it's going to continue. So you got to take care of it right away. But you also don't want to punish people for having friendship. Like, how many episodes of this podcast have we talked about how important friendship is? I think every single episode. So to say that, your friendship sucks and it's the worst and it's ruining everyone's days, so if you could just not be friends, that would be cool, is probably not going to go over too well. And so it's not the idea that friendship is bad per se. It's what can we do that in the workplace we can encourage other communication so we don't have, going back to number 1, excessive togetherness. Number 3, they ostracize other employees. So when there's a committee, they choose to be on that committee together. When there's a group project, then they're like, we'll do it. And so what happens is they're always spending time together, again, excessive togetherness, and then they're not working with other people. And so then what ends up happening is from all that time spent together, they have inside jokes or other secrets or other inside tracks to business because they're sort of it's like Gollum from Lord of the Rings, mine. Together, the group is this is ours. And so it kind of gets other people out of even having a say in things because they're not involved. Number 4, they often have several types of bullies. And so what you can see is that there's covert ways in which to impact people where it's sort of more social and relational aggression. You have overt ways where people are aggressive. And so one of the things that when you're in the workplace, you want to be well aware of what your workplace policy is regarding bullying, because that would be where workplace cliques are included and things like exclusion and so on and so forth. And also different types of bullies, there very might well be a leader of the group in which might be more obvious than the people that might go along with it or don't say anything. Okay, number 5, cliques often include gossip, backstabbing, and rumor spreading, and this can be really disruptive to the workplace. And so if these things are happening, no matter where you are in the workplace, are you in the front door when you walk in? Are you someone's assistant? Are you a coworker? Are you a manager? Are you someone who's in a different department? All these different things, you have to consider how you might respond to it. Do you join in on gossip? Do you then share that rumor with someone else? Do you tell the person, oh, yeah, I won't say anything about you, and then you go backstab them? Do you continue the behavior? Or do you say, I'm going to walk away from this gossip. I'm going to tell people to stop. I'm not going to allow it. Those things are important to maybe shutting down those cliques. Number 6, cliques often cyberbully, so you have to think about what sort of technology and other internet-related things that you're doing in the workplace, whether it be working remote, or if it's having a Slack group or chat or emails, or if people are just taking pictures and videos and posting it and that sort of thing, and how that might impact people outside the workplace. It continues outside the hours that they're actually in their office. And then number 7, cliques require conformity. So they feel safe when everyone behaves in the same way. And so what happens is they shut other people down, maybe in discussions, because other people might be afraid of rocking the boat, or you hear things like, well, that's the way it's always been. And so there's nothing that changes. There's no room for improvement. There's no room for anything that you're not going to be listened to. And so they want everyone just to be like, go along with what they say. And so there's a lot of intimidation that can happen. So those are just a couple of things that Sherry Gordon talked about in her 2018 article. And I think what is most critical here is why workplace cliques are problematic. I think there's 2 primary effects on the workplace, including first, excluding others, and 2, impacting the well-being of the entire environment and its workers. So one article for CNN even said that the workplace cliques are, quote unquote, bad for business because overall, workplace cliques contributes to workplace loneliness. I read this really sobering article about the workplace loneliness epidemic, and this was in Forbes, and it was written by John Feldman. The article was published in June 2018, and it indicated, quote, loneliness can translate to a reduced lifespan equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day, an even greater threat than obesity, end quote. Yikes fest, guys. Oh my goodness. Loneliness is, oh my goodness. Do we want to feel lonely, or do we want to start? I guess I have the solution. This is how we decrease loneliness in the workplace. Everyone go back to smoking cigarettes, or maybe if you're like cigarettes are bad, let's do some vaping. Go out on your workplace breaks and vape together and make some friends. Okay, I'm being facetious because there's 15 cigarettes a day, that loneliness is equivalent to that, and it's a bigger risk than obesity to our lifespan. So to me, as someone who studies friendship, this is no joke. That this is something that I thought a lot about before I started the podcast, and it has really just sort of slapped me in the face every single week doing an episode or talking to people or engaging with listeners, that the flip side of friendship, which is that making friends is difficult, that people are lonely, that people are rejected. This is what we need to be concerned about because it impacts our health. The friendship person in me that's like cares about this so much is just, this is devastating. And certainly loneliness can come from the way the workplace has changed over time. Think about all the use of technology now, which decreases interactions with people. And if you're a remote worker, you're not even in the workplace with people. When there's break times, how people spend it, whether or not together or off doing other things or on their phone. And then, of course, an exclusion in other ways, like through workplace cliques. But loneliness overall means this, folks. It means the person who is experiencing loneliness puts less attention on making, repairing, or maintaining the social connections in the workplace. So it's almost like it can end up being a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like you want to make connections, but then the feelings of loneliness sort of stop you from doing it. There's also an effect on the outcomes and output of work. There are limits on performance and creativity. And for some people's jobs, creativity is everything. And there is an impaired reasoning and decision-making. So going to meetings, answering emails, having to make quick decisions, all that can be impaired because of feelings of loneliness. The CNN article that I mentioned earlier was released last week and was written by Catherine Vasel. Can I just mention, though, you'll notice that a lot of this research and a lot of these articles are recent, which indicates to me that either there's some sort of holiday, like a workplace holiday, that's really making people think about it. Maybe it's the holiday aspect of it. We have all these holidays coming up, so people will be away from work. So maybe it's a time to reflect on the workplace. You know, we have the new year, so people want to have a fresh start in the workplace. Maybe this is a big time of year when people transition. Or if there's not a holiday and there isn't something that has been like a stimulus for all these articles, maybe the stimulus is this is a bigger problem. This is becoming an epidemic, as the Feldman article indicated. So yes, the CNN article, she talks about that there are fewer interactions in the workplace. People are more likely to send emails than walk next door and talk to someone about something. Remote workplaces also contribute to loneliness if people are spending all their time at home. And here's the thing, some people do really well working at home. They can find different ways, they have a home office and maybe they change it up by going to a coffee shop, whatever the case is. Some people do that really well and are able to maintain connections. But for some people, they can feel completely disconnected from everyone else because they're not interacting with them in a consistent fashion other than through technology. So these are some of the things that can contribute to loneliness. However, Catherine also mentions that you can work in a crowd full of people and feel completely alone because you're not close to anyone. And I think this was the most important thing that was in the article, so I'm going to say it again. You can work in a crowd full of people and feel completely alone because you're not close to anyone. Friendships are critical to engagement and happiness in the workplace, but lack of friendship and even feeling excluded by a group of coworkers can decrease or eliminate work experiences. These work experiences you have, like being curious and challenged and excited by the work you can do, all that can be impacted by feeling excluded by other people. So think of it this way. In what ways do we isolate people in the workplace so they feel like an outsider? Are they left out of decisions? Are they not being included on emails? Are there closed-door meetings without them? Are they not being recognized for their work? Are they not being listened to by other people? Are they not valued by the coworkers? And so much more. All of these things can contribute to isolating people in the workplace. And like other research and advice from experts has said, workplace exclusion and loneliness means the isolated worker has lower job performance, feels less committed, and may be viewed as less approachable by other coworkers. Again, that might be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Even more, those people may push away any help that they might be offered, and the company might lose those employees because they feel lonely, they don't feel included or welcome, so they end up leaving their job. And these feelings of loneliness can spread to others. The CNN article really talks about how the negative feelings of loneliness can spread in the workplace, much like a virus. So what can we do? What's the upshot here, Alysa? I used to have a friend and graduate teacher at Michigan State. His name was Aaron, and he would always be like, so what's the upshot here? Well, let me tell you what the upshot is. There's advice from various sources I pulled together and organized, and all those sources are included in my show notes. And just as a reminder, you can always access all of my show notes, all the things that I mention, examples, you can get links to the Heather's trailer, for example, any things I talk about, any of the promoted podcasts, anything I talk about, it's all in show notes, and you can access that via your podcatcher or from my webpage, bestforeverspod.com. So you can find all the articles I used for this. But I think that the advice about what can be done can be broken down into two parts. First, we have managers and employees and what they can do to help in the workplace so that people are not feeling lonely, they're not excluded, and we can sort of put a kibosh on workplace cliques. And then it also comes from the point of view of what the isolated individual, the one that feels excluded by a group of people, what they can do. So let's first start with managers and employees. First, managers should note that new employees are probably most likely to feel excluded and lonely, and therefore managers or the leaders or the workplace might consider ways in which to help a new employee get acclimated. Second, encourage people to get up and make connections. Physically walk to someone's office or their station or their cubicle or whatever else and chat with them instead of sending an email. Maybe you set up a meeting and you meet in a conference room or you meet over coffee. You do something where you're making more connections. And I know you're probably thinking, well, if you meet for coffee, well, then that's like a clique because it's just two people. Well, not if you do it with everyone. You're making connections with everyone, right? Or that everyone's always welcome to come unless you are focusing on a specific task. Third, you can show appreciation. And a few years ago, I went to visit a place of business in Detroit. It was run by an alum of Central Michigan University where I work, and his place of business was amazing. It had the coolest culture. It was very clear what the values were. They were everywhere. It was a place that really encouraged creativity, and they had bikes so employees could go ride their bikes. They had basketball hoops so you could play that. They had a bocce ball tournament. They had all these things. But he talked about every day they had a meeting, and everyone had to be there at this time, and everyone's in this space, and it was a time to be like, who just closed with this account? Who's having a birthday or an anniversary? What are all the accomplishments people make? What are all the appreciations? And so I think that was something that was really neat and stood out about that place of business, is that together they foster and reinforce this idea of appreciating what everyone contributes to the workplace, no matter what their role is. And so that is one way in which you can show that you value people and that they don't feel off on their own. The fourth piece of advice for managers and employees is to consider incorporating remote workers more purposefully. So instead of having them just like Skype in or whatever they might do for a meeting, you might have them run a meeting. You might have them come in every so often so that they can run a meeting face to face, or they can present what they've been doing. There's other ways to incorporate remote workers so that the employees that work in-house know who they are and they make connections, and so that the remote workers can feel like they're a part of the business as well. Fifth, and as I mentioned before, if you are a close-knit group, which is fine, we have friends and it's cool, you might just want to consider if there's a way to sort of break up your group temporarily so not to isolate others. Friendships are great, and there's no reason whatsoever why you cannot maintain those amazing connections in the workplace. But think about it this way. If you have meetings, maybe you sit next to someone different at every meeting. Maybe when you have group projects or committees, you change them up so that you're working with different people. Maybe you do different things where it's like in 2s or 3s or 4, you change it up just so that everyone's talking to each other. And as a teacher, I do this in the classroom so that students can get to know each other and they feel more invested in the class. They are more connected to each other. And what I find is that when they know each other, they call each other by name, and it's just, you can see more wonderful foundations of connections happening among everyone. Okay, so those are some ideas for managers and employees. And then I have some more detailed advice for isolated individuals. And so from one article by Jacqueline Smith, which is in my show notes, she talked about some of the things that you can do. Like there's 9 pieces of advice that she has. So if you're isolated, one of the things you can do is try to spend time with all your coworkers, not just one particular group. And so you're in the workplace and there's like 4 people and it just does not feel like you can infiltrate their group. One of the things that you could do is talk to each person. And maybe by talking to each person one-on-one, you start to get to know them better. So that was some of the advice that goes back to employees, that employees can consider that, but the isolated individual can also do something too. Second, if you're an isolated individual, you might go, well, I don't want to be a part of the clique anyway, but you still want to treat everyone in that clique in a courteous and professional manner. As I was talking about before, there might be a leader. You might identify who that leader is in a clique and figure out a way to be less intimidated by that person, maybe spending more time trying to get to know them, maybe figuring out ways and observing how they interact so that you can figure out the best way in which to approach them. 4, determine whether joining a clique will be beneficial or detrimental to your career. If you decide against joining a clique, do not engage in any gossip with clique members. So this one is a little different, right? Saying maybe I should join a clique. It's like, if you have different groups, it's like an episode of Survivor. You got your different alliances, or maybe you're watching West Side Story. It's like the Jets versus the Sharks. But there might be benefits to being in a group of allies, right? And so most of you are probably thinking, no, that doesn't seem like that would be very helpful. But it is important to consider, like, you can be friendly, but you don't need to be a part of them. So if the clique does target you, which is number 5, if they taunt you or turn their backs on you or gossip about you, it's best to not react at all. And that can be hard. So maybe it's figuring out a different outlet so that you're not reacting in the workplace. And this is a good reminder, because not everyone's going to be friends, that you can be friendly without being friends or becoming friends. That was 6. Number 7, try to keep a healthy peer group outside of the office so you don't rely solely on coworkers for your social activity. I think this is a wonderful piece of advice. When I talked about before, I had cheerleader friends, I had newspaper friends, I had church friends, I had neighborhood friends. The idea is that if you rely on all of your social connections coming from the workplace, it's going to be even more devastating if you're no longer part of that group, or you're excluded by the group, or you are having some sort of difficulty making any sort of friends in the workplace. And so it's a good idea to have different types of friends anyway. However, I would note that because we spend so much time in the workplace, remember, 90,000 hours. 90,000 hours. In our workplace, what we do is so much of our identity. I know that we put in so much in the workplace, and so maybe that's where a lot of our friendships come. But maybe there's another way to make friends by, maybe you relieve stress by working out, so maybe you join a running group and you make another friend that way. If you are only able to make friends in the workplace, for example, maybe it's someone from a different department or a different office. I remember when I worked for the state of Michigan, I was a student assistant in one division, and Kate, my best friend, was in a different division, right? Think about it that way. Maybe there's a way different divisions or groups or departments, whatever the case might be. Okay, number 8, you can seek outside guidance from a mentor, counselor, or career coach about how you can sort of manage these situations, especially if you're interested or you have to stay in that job and thinking about promotions and other things going on and climbing the workplace ladder and being able to take on new challenges, that you might need some other guidance besides people that are within your space, your workspace. And then finally, try to find a group of coworkers to spend time with who don't overindulge in office gossip. So again, you can be friendly without becoming friends. So maybe you find a couple of people you check in with every day that doesn't have that negativity of gossip, but doesn't have that maybe a larger requirement or expectation that you spend a lot of time with them. Okay, so folks, I really wanted to do this episode because I read this article from The Cut entitled "What to Do When You Feel Left Out at Work" by Katie Heaney. And this was published on the 3rd of December. So I just read it a couple weeks ago, even less than that. And it provides some really good advice as well. She adds in 4 other pieces of advice. And like I said, this sort of inspired the episode. And so what Katie talks about in her December 3rd article is this: do not feel bad for feeling bad, because workplace relationships do impact careers. You can't think that people aren't talking as they're in their closed door meetings, in hallway conversations, whatever the case might be, that work doesn't come up if people are friends outside of the workplace. And how we connect and relate to each other is going to impact how we perceive each other, how we approach each other, how we respond to each other, if we listen to each other, if we value each other, if we respect each other. And that can all have an impact on the decisions that are made about advancement, about professional development, about raises, about so many different things. So kudos to Katie for starting out with that piece of advice. Number 2, she says, find an ally. And I think that's something that we've seen in some other cases, even if it's just one other person. Finding one other person in the workplace in which to connect with can make you feel less alone in that workplace. I like this one. Number 3, she says, count your mixed blessings. And you're probably thinking, what does she mean by that? What she means by that is not being in a clique sucks. However, being in a clique sucks, right? Because don't forget that cliques require conformity. So if someone disagrees about something that the clique is doing, there can be some sort of conflict that they occur. And, if there's a leader, other people might feel like they're silenced by that person and they want to find a way to get out and they can't, because it is very much like what we've seen in Mean Girls and Heathers, and even in Big Bang Theory. Those 4 guys are friends. They sit together in the workplace and very few other people are included, right? So I think that you don't always want to look up to a clique like, that's my goal, because it might not be that great once you get there. And I think we might have some experience with that. Finally, and I think this is really important too, I just love this article by Katie. It says, know that this is most often an organizational responsibility, not an individual responsibility. And what she means by that, it is that it is up to a place of business to create an office culture that welcomes employees, that it is up to the entire office to reinforce that culture or to stop anything that harms the culture. And I think a lot of times someone that is excluded can be blamed for office culture when really there might be other connections and other things going on. And so for managers, this is for isolated folks, right? That it isn't on you, especially if you are a woman, a person of color, or any other groups that have been marginalized. It is not up to you to create any space that welcomes people, right? That is up to the office and the business. Now, certainly we all can contribute to the culture, but I think this is from like a manager's point of view or someone who's running a business. What do you want your office culture to look like? And then observe what the office culture is like. And if it doesn't meet that, then start to think about ways in which you can change the culture. She talks about friendships in the workplace being positive, but also with a lot of risks. Friendships are helpful, but cliques can be dangerous, and being left out can be even more dangerous because of what she calls missed jokes and missed opportunities. And okay, maybe not being included in on a joke is not that big of a deal, but certainly that can start to weigh on you that you're not included or people don't like you or whatever the case is. But maybe more importantly in the workplace is that you miss out on opportunities in which to excel, to succeed, to be challenged, to have another opportunity. You don't have that chance. And so people can be hurt emotionally, and then they can be hurt work-wise as well. So I recently presented at the CMU Connections Conference, which is for students who are interested in learning more about leadership. My presentation was called Rejecting Rejection. Take that, rejection, I'm rejecting you. And I talked to these students about how as leaders, whether assigned as leaders or in a shared leadership situation like in a workplace or in a group, that you could look for signs of folks being excluded and then make some small changes to make it a better situation. So I wanted to share with you some of the information that I talked about in my presentation because it seems relevant here. And again, this becomes a continued idea that I have that this podcast has brought out of me as this idea is friendship is wonderful, but I really want to put more attention into the flip side when we are having difficulty making friends or we're excluded or we're rejected or we feel lonely, because I think there are a lot of implications for our health and our well-being there. And so I talked about a number of things. I defined a number of things for them. But let's go ahead and I'll start talking about what the implications of rejection in the group or in the workplace are. So some of this might be familiar, but for rejected folks, the isolated folks, the ones that are excluded, they then start to isolate themselves from their group, which may include missing meetings, work, and deadlines. They lose confidence in their ability to do tasks that they were doing before because they don't feel like people see them as doing a good job, which is why showing appreciation is important. They start to have resentment for others, the task or the goal of the group or the place of business. And they appear not to be contributing when they have tried to contribute and their help or work is not accepted. So for many years, I taught group communication classes, and I would have students come to me or write peer reviews, and it's like, this person was a slacker, they were a social loafer, they never did anything. And I said, so they never asked to help, or they never, so I'd ask more questions to get more information. Then you start to see, well, I don't really trust anyone else to do anything, so I just did it myself. And so what happens is that person couldn't trust that group member to do anything. And so what they ended up doing was creating what appeared to be, quote unquote, a slacker, when really they might not have been allowed to do everything or do anything, to be perfectly honest. But let's be clear, there are always slackers and social loafers, but sometimes I say, can we pause and go, have I somehow contributed to the slacker? Have I somehow contributed to the social loafer? So implications of rejection for their rejectors include this. They create a group where it's difficult for others to infiltrate, i.e. cliques. They may take it upon themselves to do work that excludes the rejected. So what I was just talking about, well, I'm not comfortable if other people do it, we'll just do it. And so then what happens is they make the decision to do work that doesn't allow the isolated person to even have a role. Oh, we'll just do it. We're on this committee together. Don't worry about it. They're dependent on each other, so it can become something very toxic like groupthink, where no one is questioning what anyone's doing, and then people that are participating in groupthink might not make good decisions because no one's playing devil's advocate, no one's thinking about any of the problems that could occur from that decision, and that can be pretty dangerous for a business, depending on if you serve the public or you are making money or whatever the case is. The groupthink can be problematic. And they may have meetings without the rejected members. So that rejectors can go even further in rejection by just, again, excluding people. So here are the ways that people can recognize the signs of rejection. And I have this photo that I'll post, and it's a bunch of kids, and 3 of the boys are in Batman outfits, and then there's a kid sitting like 4 feet away in a Spider-Man outfit. That might be a sign of rejection or exclusion. They're not including Spider-Man in their little Batman group. So here's what you can do in the workplace or in a group. You can set up expectations that can prevent rejection. So do you actually detail expectations that you have for your workers or for your managers so that you can eliminate the possibility of rejection before it even happens? Be observant of how everyone works together, who talks to who is never listened to, who's blown off. Is it sort of like us versus, this one person? Are there people who dominate the conversation? Are there people who are laughing throughout meetings, which has nothing to do with what you're talking about? There's lots of ways, and the idea is just sort of keep an eye on things if you're in the position of sort of maintaining that culture or wanting to change culture. This might help you. You can check in with group and individuals to see what they're feeling and maybe make decisions based on the information that is collected. And then finally, addressing behaviors that can cause someone to be rejected or behaviors that reject others. Again, you got to nip those in the bud. So communication-wise, there's some things that you can do non-verbally and verbally to bring the group together to have some sort of unity and maybe sort of eliminate or at least decrease what it feels like having a clique that divides everyone. So non-verbally, okay? When meeting, no one in the group is physically isolated. So that means when you go into a room that everyone has a chair at the table, everyone can see and hear each other. There isn't anyone off on the side. There isn't anyone out in the hallway, that everyone can view each other unless it's something very large, and then you're going to have to figure something else out. But if we're talking about a division in the workplace that's 20 people or 10 people or 5 people, what can you do so that everyone can see and hear each other? I mentioned this before, sitting next to or with others at each new meeting or time together so that you can talk to more people. Consider what you do in terms of eye contact, facial expressions, posture, and tone. When you're talking to members of your clique, you're like, oh my God, hey. And then someone else, you're like, hey. Sorry, I can't even do it without laughing. But are you talking to people differently? Because here's the thing. When we like someone, we talk to them like we like them. And we don't like someone, we talk to them like we don't like them. And typically when we exclude people, that would communicate that we don't like them. When we include people, that would indicate that we like them. Okay, verbally, team name. Okay, that's cheesy. Some people are not going to go for that, and that's fine. But that can sometimes work. And I was also talking to college students when I'm doing this, and team names work great, but it might not work for everyone. If there are invitations to anything related to work, it doesn't mean like if you and your best friend work together, you're inviting everyone to your wine nights on Saturday while you watch true crime docs. Like, no, not everyone needs an invitation. But if there is something major going on that is related to the workplace or that everyone in the workplace except for one person, you want to be sure everyone is invited. You can have special or ritual greetings or goodbyes, like when you get there, does everyone go around and say something? When you leave, does everyone go around and say something as a way to get to know each other, to make connections, to learn more about each other? That can be helpful. And that also includes small talk and good of the order. And when you are doing decision-making or problem-solving, you could do roundtable input with no judgment, which means everyone goes around and gives their point of view so that no one can be shut down or isolated or not listened to. Like everyone gets a chance to say something, and so everyone listens to everyone else. And that is a great way to show and communicate that you care about everyone in the room and what they have to say and what they're contributing to the group. And reaching out to welcome others. Like, what can you do verbally to say, hey, welcome, like you're new, or, if you're on a new committee or you have a guest in the house, what are some of the things that you can do to welcome others when you see them, when you come into the workplace? Do you spend the first 5 minutes maybe going around saying hi to everyone? There's lots of things that we can do to welcome people or make people feel welcomed. So one of the things is, it is overall the responsibility of the place of business or the organization in which to create that culture. But I also think that there are little things that we can do, and one person can make a huge difference. If everyone is excluding someone, one person standing up going, we haven't heard from this person in a while, or I really think that this person should be on this committee because of this expertise. That one person can make a huge difference in being sure that someone is included. And so don't assume that it's going to fall on a manager, that we can all do something as peers or as coworkers or any role in a place of business to be sure that we are sort of breaking down these walls around a clique, that we're not creating walls around individual people or between individual people. So again, that was something that I shared at the conference with college students, and I thought it was really relevant here. And sort of my new mission that's come out of the podcast is finding a way to reject rejection. So I'll continue to talk about that in different forms, but I thought this was important today, especially since I was seeing all these articles about the topic. And so it's likely we think of cliques in terms of our favorite movies about high school. And hey, tell me what your favorite clique movie is from high school. I want to know. Maybe there's some information and advice and lessons we can pull out of it in a future episode. But unfortunately, not all cliques are found in high school. They are also found in the workplace. And they're an issue we all should be concerned about, whether we are managing and leading folks and thus have a lot more responsibility in creating and repairing the workplace culture, employees who may or may not knowingly contribute to the exclusion of others, and of course of employees who feel left out of work because of situations like cliques, or even the impact of cliques, rumor spreading or decision making, or just difficulty in making friends and not feeling welcome. It can affect the entire workplace in a toxic way. So today I wanted to talk about this idea of workplace cliques, exclusion, loneliness, and all the ways in which this can be toxic. And given how many hours we spend in the workplace, 90,000, and that workplace loneliness has an impact on overall health, whether socially, emotionally, or career-wise, taking the advice that I talked about here may help. But if we don't take cliques or exclusion in the workplace seriously, the problem is likely to get larger rather than smaller. Let's be honest, if we don't address things, it's never going to go away. And so the first thing we might need to do is recognize that these things might be happening in our own workplace house, if you will. And friends, sometimes knowing we're not alone can help, right? That we're not the only ones that feel excluded in the workplace. So at the top of the episode, I asked for stories of workplace friendships to celebrate, but I also would like you to send me your stories of workplace friendships that have gone wrong, the difficulties that you've had of being accepted or included on the job or making friends in the workplace, how cliques have contaminated your workplace, or how feelings of loneliness have impacted you. We can commiserate together, but also we can continue to focus on how we approach friendship in the workplace. Because without our friends, or in this case, our workplace friends or workplace allies, who would we be? Thanks for listening to Best Forevers. If you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe, rate, review, and of course, share with a friend. Please be sure to follow Best Forevers on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Best Forevers Pod, and I'm at Dr. Alysa Lucas on Twitter. You can always find the podcast webpage for more information at bestforeverspod.com, and share your stories of friendship by emailing me at bestforeverspod@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support the movement to love on our friends more, check out the podcast on patreon.com/bestforeverspod. Now, friends, check out this recommended podcast that you must get in your ear holes immediately.
Hey, Christy, what do we talk about on our podcast?
Well, Ashley, we talk about all kinds of weird stuff.
Like aliens.
And ghosts.
And cults.
And cryptids.
And witches.
And murders.
Yeah, even sometimes murders. Basically, we talk about all kinds of weird shit.
Oh, I already said that.
Oh.
So yeah, if you like weird topics, feminist rants, and the occasional F-bomb, you should listen to us.
We post new episodes every other Monday.
Find us online at thatsweird.org.
And subscribe to That's Weird on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts.